to get started on changing your mindset and making the decision to move forward, because a lot of it is, I just need to move. I'm scared, I'm uncomfortable, and I know the solution is to move forward. That's where my mind is at. That's where it's always been at, is like, if I'm uncomfortable, that's a good sign. I need to move forward. But some people can't really step out of that. And that's where I find it, like, it has to be your decision. So you can come to a coach, you can come to a consultant, and we can give you the right map, the right tools, the right guide, all of those things. But if you don't make the decision to step forward, you don't make the decision to change that mindset, then there's not really much that can happen for you beyond that.
Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zac Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Now, today I'm thrilled to welcome a good friend of mine, Vanessa Kavulish. Vanessa is an ICF-accredited health and life coach, head of Humble Rebellion Coaching, where she serves as a women's empowerment coach, owner of Benefit Bar, a mobile bartending service geared towards sustainability and community, a dance fitness instructor, and a senior coach and community manager for Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi at mastermind.com. After putting herself on the sidelines for years trying to conform to what she thought she should be, Vanessa transformed her pain into her passion and now loves impacting lives by helping people who are committed to transforming their dreams into their reality. So let's dive in and take another step on your journey to perpetual growth. Vanessa, welcome.
Thanks, Zach. I'm so excited to be here. And thank you for that incredible intro. That was amazing.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. I feel blessed to have you here today, my friend. What's tough for me with this conversation starting out is I know you and I've known you for years now. So I'm going to have to pretend like I don't in order to really extract all the goodness, because our audience needs to know all the bits and pieces of your journey. So, if you would be like, just share with our listeners a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, your story history. Where did you start? How did it lead to where you are today, and some of the things that you are now building on, the successes that you've experienced, maybe some of the trials and challenges along the way? Just talk to us a little bit about your professional journey.
Yeah. So it's really funny because if I go all the way back to where my entrepreneurial journey started, it would be when I was probably 5 years old. And you actually may not know this about me, but when I was about five, I had a little office set up in my bedroom. I had a little desk that I built, and one of those "we'll be back soon" signs with a clock on it that I would hang outside my room so people knew when they could come in for appointments. And so I really feel like this has always been something that's very, like, intensely been on my heart, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have friends where we would go in the desert and just pick dried flowers and press them into rocks and try to sell those to people when we were kids too. We didn't do the traditional lemonade stand. That's what you do in a small town, I guess, when you're little and you're trying to figure out, how do I make money? So I've always had this kind of spark for this inside of me. But as an adult, where it really started to come and kind of bubble to the surface was in 2019 with my health and fitness journey. So that started because I felt like I was at a spot where I was at rock bottom. I wasn't comfortable in my own body with my mindset. I was hanging out with the wrong people. And I found this really amazing dance fitness community that I fell in love with. And I did what I always do as an overachiever. And I was like, I need to be certified in that. I need to teach that. I need to lead a women's community, and I just need to do all of the things. And so that's kind of where it started. And at the time, I was in hospitality. I was a restaurant manager. So I was juggling both of those and posting a lot of the mindset journey that I was on as I was learning to be an instructor, losing weight, learning how to eat healthy, create healthy substitutes for things that I loved. And I had a lot of people sliding into my DMs asking me throughout this journey, like, "Hey, are you a life coach?" And at the time I was like, "I don't even really know what that is. Like, what are you talking about?" Like, "No, I'm just, trying to spread positivity and show you that, like, if you're positive, it works." And it was probably the third or fourth DM I got asking me if I was a coach, where I was like, "Okay, I hear this from the universe. I should probably lean into this. This is probably a sign that I should be a coach." So I did a little bit of research on it. And this was in March of 2020. So it was right as the pandemic was starting to happen. And oh no, sorry, this was actually 2021. This was after the pandemic. So I started to do a little bit of research and I found the Health Coach Institute and I interviewed them. I went to a little call with them and said, say less. Here's my money. Just take my money and let's run with it. So I was certified in 6 months. And then I became a coach. I focused on body positivity for a while and then shifted to women's empowerment. I'm in the process of making a bigger change with that now, which I'm sure we'll get into here in a little bit. But that's kind of been my journey. That's also how I ended up at Mastermind with Dean Graziosi and Tony Robbins. Was I was just building my audience.
Mhm.
So a lot of what's happened for me, at least, is kind of happenstance, and that's also how I ended up with the bar. So I was helping a friend there she's a friend of mine who owns a party planning business, and I was just making balloon displays for her on the side just for fun and something to fill my time, make a little bit of extra cash. And I ended up at a mutual friend's birthday party. She had this Taylor Swift bejeweled 50th birthday party. It was beautiful. It was, sparkly glitter things everywhere. And she wanted me to take her drinks and just dump them into a dispenser. And I was like, I can't in good conscience do that to you. Like, this is your 50th birthday party. Everything else is done to the nines. And I've got all this experience as a bartender. I can't do that. So I was like, you know what? For your birthday, I'm going to be your bartender. I'm going to stand at this table. I'm going to mix drinks to order for people. And people really loved it. I mean, they still talk about it, how incredible the drinks were, how beautiful they looked. And so I walked away from that night and I was like, you know what? I think I have something here. And it was because of my constant immersion with coaching and with mastermind that had me always thinking about, like, can I monetize this? Can I sell what I know? How can I turn that into a framework and make it something that works? And so that was the birth of Benefit Bar. And that also kind of leads me into the pivot, is like, how am I now changing and iterating on the other businesses that I do have to make it where I can be of service to people and use those frameworks from my knowledge and give it to everybody else. So that was probably a longer answer than you were looking for, but I think that covers pretty much everything. So
No, I love it. I mean, I still can't stop thinking about you as 5 years old, sitting with the "Do Not Disturb" sign on your door. Or I'll be back. You just, Mom, you need an appointment.
yep.
It's classic. But and also too, just it's funny because you brought up lemonade stands, because both my younger two now are begging me to build a lemonade stand, which I'm sure is going to happen in the next couple of weekends.
Yes.
My oldest, I remember building her a lemonade stand. She was right around my son's age at present, like 8 years old at the time. And what I loved is like her enthusiasm. I mean, she was standing out on the curb. She's yelling, "Get your fresh lemonade." And it was like people would stop just because she was so passionate and fun, and leave like
Yeah.
$5, $10 instead of one or whatever it was for the lemonade. It was just a great experience. But I love things like that too, because I think those are those little opportunities where you start to see that there's something more, that you're driven to beyond just, oh, let's go to school and get a good job. And I think more often than not, as kids, it's easy to forget about those things and you start doing what we're being conditioned to do. Like you talked about all the things that you should do, as opposed to what do I really want to do? What is my passion, my calling? And this is another thing I want to point out to the audience is you don't have to have it all figured out. Like most people think that really successful business owners and entrepreneurs, it's like, I woke up and I'm Elon Musk and I decided to build a freaking rocket one day and we're going to go to Mars. And it's like, no, that was probably the byproduct of countless different conversations and iterations. I mean, God knows he probably didn't wake up when he was 30 years old and be like, hey, we're going to build a rocket one day, right? So A, you don't have to have it all figured out. And B, you also only have to pursue one thing. Like there's a convergence between all of the things you're doing, even though some of them are very divergent tracks. Like, bartending and health don't necessarily go together, but what does is the experience that you're creating for the people that you're working with, right? So I'm always looking for what the common thread is, even in things that can superficially seem polarizing. Um, one thing, like, I had the blessed opportunity to work alongside you for a few years, and it was really, really fun. But speaking to your professional experience, like it's one thing to know that somebody's a coach or a life coach or a business coach or whatever. But you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people. I mean, I'm guessing, somewhere to the tune of hundreds, if not thousands of clients at this stage. And, one thing that you and I both know is what starts to happen is you start to recognize patterns. And that's what leads us in many cases to developing frameworks to create a solution. So what I want to take from that is, leveraging all of your knowledge and experience. If somebody is on the in the earlier stages of their entrepreneurial journey, are there certain commonalities, patterns again, if you will, that you notice, whether it is in terms of the mindset or the skill set or anything above, below, or in between, that people frequently struggle with? And what are some of the things that you're doing to help them overcome those challenges?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are lots of commonalities in that. And the biggest is mindset. And it doesn't matter if it's weight loss or starting to be a coach or opening up a brick and mortar shop. It's all the same. It's all of these limiting beliefs and these boxes that we conform ourselves to from a very young age, where when we're exposed to learning how society is supposed to work and how it's supposed to function, right? Like we are really taught, like you keep your head down, you get good grades, you go to work, and that's it. You save. It used to be get a pension, 401k, all of that stuff, which we know is kind of out the window at this point. And that's it. And that's the strategy, right? Get good grades, get a good job, save your money. Like, that's it. And so when people have these passions, they first ignore them and then they realize that they have them, and then they don't know how to move forward. They don't know how to do anything about it. And sometimes it has to do with people outside of them. For a lot of people, it's them getting in their own way. And that's what it was for me. I was getting in my own way because I was also keeping people around me at the time who were happy staying where they were and were happy, going through that day to day. So that's what I decided was normal. It didn't matter what I knew I wanted to do from a very young age. So the key, and where people struggle, and I know that there's lots of frameworks out there. And so this may be against popular opinion. And I'm going to be interested to hear what your opinion is, because I feel like you might oppose this. This would get interesting. But I also feel like to get started on changing your mindset and making the decision to move forward, because a lot of it is, I just need to move. I'm scared, I'm uncomfortable, and I know the solution is to move forward. That's where my mind is at. That's where it's always been at, is like, if I'm uncomfortable, that's a good sign. I need to move forward. But some people can't really step out of that. And that's where I find it, like, it has to be your decision. So you can come to a coach, you can come to a consultant, and we can give you the right map, the right tools, the right guide, all of those things. But if you don't make the decision to step forward, you don't make the decision to change that mindset, then there's not really much that can happen for you beyond that.
Hmm. No, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you
Yeah.
can't make them drink, right? It's simple
Yeah.
reality. And because there's been such a polarity in what we've been told, it's like no wonder why it's so challenging for people to get started, particularly when it comes to something they fear. Where I started to find solutions to this, at least for me personally, and it's still a philosophy that I abide by and speak frequently to today, is when something scares me, I run towards it. It's like skydiving, yeah, it's scary as hell, but it was also the most exhilarating thing that I've ever done. If I fear it, I'm going to go attack it, because what I'm doing is training my mind to get to the point where I don't have to negotiate with myself. It's like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to prove it's possible. It doesn't mean it's going to be done well. It doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. It just means that I take some sort of action towards its attainment. And what I'm doing is building that muscle. And that's that decision-making paradigm, that willingness to do what most people won't, that differentiates everybody. And at the same time, I don't want this to sound like it's a like, I don't want people beating themselves up over the idea that they haven't necessarily taken action yet, or that maybe they've started and they run into life's and business challenges and they fall back. It's like, it doesn't matter where you are or how old you are, what stage of life, anything. What's matter is that you make a decision and you start taking some sort of action towards attainment on a daily basis. And I couldn't agree more. And you're also right too, that frameworks are only as powerful as the person that's executing on them. And if you're not executing, it's really easy to pay a lot of money to people with the expectation that just because you made the investment, things are going to happen. But the reality is, if you're not the one doing the work, the probability of that becoming successful or staying successful is very, very low. So brilliant insights. What I'd be interested to hear too is, you're a women's empowerment coach, right? I mean, that's your predominant focus. Now, I know in business coaching, you work with a really wide depth and breadth of people. But from the feminine perspective, are there certain things that you believe the female psychology or the feminine psychology is battling, that's not being spoken to maybe loudly enough today, and that you're really wanting to be a voice of motivation, inspiration, reason, solitude, like whatever the thing is, like, why there?
Yeah. So I think both genders have a similar problem. It's just
Hmm.
focused on different things. So I want to start by saying that. But
Hmm.
with women in particular, we are raised that you don't speak unless spoken to. And this is a little bit of an older adage, but like you're seen and not heard, right? And girls wear dresses and they play with Barbies and things are pink and clean and you learn to cook and do all of these things that are in our society just considered to be feminine, and it's like all you do is care for other people. And so I think that that is actually the primary thing that gets in our ways, because when we want something, it's so good to care about other people and to care for them and to have that empathy. But I also think, again, probably against popular belief, we have too much of that, and there's probably women listening right now who know that and will never say that out loud. And the reason that I say that is because you can't care for somebody in the way that you actually want to if you don't ever take care of yourself. And so you're always pouring from a half empty cup to other people when you're always putting them first. Never considering, what do you want out of life? Never considering, like, do I want to be a stay-at-home mom, or do I want to be a career woman as a CEO, or whatever it is that's in their day-to-day life. But is that what you really want? Like, have you stopped to think about what it is that you really want? There's so many people who are, you'll ask a woman, what's one thing you regret in your life? And they'll rattle off a list of things. I wish I hadn't got married at this age. You'll never hear one probably say this out loud unless you ask them directly, but there are women too who are moms who never wanted to have kids. And they love their children, but they did it because that's what they thought was the next step for them. They don't actually stop to say, like, what is it that I want to do with my life? And so, because that's a thing, and more people are talking about this now, there's more conversation around it, but there's still not action around it. So I see a lot of that as well, where if I poll my following on social media, for example, or my email audience, I will get a lot of anonymous people who haven't worked with me yet who say, I would love to work with you, but I'll never do it because I don't want people to find out that I want help. I don't want people to find out that I want to make this change. I don't want people to find out that I'm not sure of myself. And it's so interesting to me. And so I really think that that's the biggest problem, is that even though we know that it's there, that we know that we need to kind of make a change, we still don't feel like we have permission. In a lot of ways, we're not giving it to ourselves to step forward and say, I want something more for my life.
Hmm. That's a really interesting observation. I want to unpack that a little bit more, as our good friend Preach says to us. I want to unpack that a little bit more. Sorry, inside joke, guys. Uh, good
You
person.
have
We'll
to bring
talk
him
more
on
about it later.
next.
Yeah, exactly. Um, you know, there, I'm not even sure where to start with this, because there's so many layers that I would like to speak to. You know, that conditioning on so many levels does drive our decision-making paradigms throughout life. And I think, the way I heard it, and was one thing how I might reiterate, articulate one things you were saying, is a lot of people have that voice. Everybody has that voice that's telling them things that they want to pursue, things that they would like to do. But then there's the little devil on the other shoulder that's like, oh, you can't do it. You're not smart enough. You're too old. You don't live in the right city. Whatever it is. There's an infinite number of excuses that we can come up with. And the reality is, the vast majority of those conversations, while conscious in the moment, I think are also being held within ourselves on autopilot. And it's like, if you just take a moment, go on a walk and allow yourself to think freely. But instead of allowing it to flow into one ear and out the other, take mental notes or maybe jot something into your phone. That's what I frequently do. Because if you bring awareness to the conversations that you're having yourself, even in terms of the things that you want or that you don't want, oftentimes that's that like internal guide that is calling and compelling you to more. It's just most people are sweeping it under the rug. And I think that's another one of the big challenges. I see this from a coaching standpoint all the time is, 9 out of 10 people, if I ask them what they want, what's the answer they give me? What they don't want.
Yeah.
Fascinating paradigm. And I'm like, and you wonder why you keep getting more of what you don't want. You just gave me, I asked you what you want, and you just gave me a 20-item list of everything that you don't want, but I still haven't heard what you do. What is the antithesis to these things? What does that look like? What is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? What puts a smile on your face? What makes you happy? And I think another thing that I want to bring attention to what you said too is and this comes back to the conformity is if you want to be a parent and a mom, a stay-at-home mom, that's a phenomenal job and role. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be a CEO, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't matter what you want to be. What matters is you get clear on what's important to you and then go pursue that thing. Am I getting that right? Does that sound congruent?
100%. And the beauty in that too is you can do something super small.
Mm,
You don't have to, the example you used was go skydiving. You don't have to do that. Maybe you just jump off of a short wall first and just see like, did I enjoy that? For me, it was going to a dance class the first time where I didn't know anybody, but I knew I wanted to do it. My
yeah.
friends they would have rather died than be caught dead at a dance class, but I made the leap to go do that. And it's built up everything else. So you just kind of dip your toe into that water and it's still safe enough to show you and to build the confidence that you can move forward.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Talk a little bit more about your journey. Well, God, there's so many things I want to dive into because I want to stay on the course and path of coaching, women's empowerment. You know, let's go back to the common client that you're working with first before we talk more about Benefit Bar. Um, because I know that you work with a very dynamic depth and breadth of clients. However, the majority of them are starting in similar circles. And we both agree that mindset more often than not is one of the biggest issues, and largely because of the environmental conditioning and things that we've gone through. What we've been taught was right, what we've been taught was wrong, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And as our listeners know, I like to say, what people have a tendency to do is should all over themselves. But instead of saying we should or should not, just go freaking pick the thing and do it. I mean, it's the simple reality. Of course, I'm oversimplifying, but it's truth. So,
Yeah.
what is the next step for most people? Because one thing that you said that I thought was so fascinating is people are afraid to admit they need help, or they're afraid of what other people are going to think about the fact they're asking for help. On almost every single podcast episode, I talk about the benefits of coaching and consultants and across context. Every year of my life, I've had coaches for relationships, business coaches, health coaches, and spiritual coaches in every single context. Why? Because I understand and know I don't know what I don't know. And I know that there are people that have achieved more, that have better relationships, that have an even higher elevated level of health. And I want to be able to model and learn and extract from the things that they are doing that's made them so successful. So, to encourage the listeners, if there's any part of you that thinks that there's a negative perception, a judgment, whatever, that comes with hiring a coach or working with a consultant or mentor or anything, like it is one of the single greatest investments that you can possibly make. Would you agree?
Hands down. I even still have coaches, and I'm also thankful that I have friends that are coaches because then I can pick who I'm going to go to for guidance and encouragement.
Mhm.
I wish more people did it. I think, and of course, as people are more and more getting comfortable with using therapy,
Mhm.
hopefully they'll also get more comfortable with coaching as well, because dealing with your past traumas is super important, but so is focusing on optimization for your future.
Mhm.
And that's what coaching is.
I'm going to get vulnerable for a second. And one thing I'll admit was, I'd gone through several major life transitions over the last couple of years. I mean, turning 40, going back independent. I was, as a business owner for 20 years, worked side by side with you at Mastermind for a while and was on stage with Tony and Dean and did a lot of things, but there's been major life transitions over the last few years. And I hit this point where I'm like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I really want to do. And the hardest thing for me when I had gone for 20 years, Mach 10 with my hair on fire, was giving myself permission to slow down. And sometimes we have to slow down in order to speed up. We have to slow down to be able to really listen to ourselves, to go internal and explore. Like, it's okay to not have all the answers. We're also being brought into this environment where we either by a byproduct of the things that we see and the stories that we tell ourselves or the things that we are being told, you think you're just supposed to know everything and show up as this business savant or relationship expert. Relationships don't come with a handbook. Business, yes, there's countless different ways to develop and build businesses, and there's a little bit more of a blueprint in that context. But like the main point is it's okay to make these investments. It's okay to not know. It's okay to experiment. And one of the best investments I made was in a relationship coach because it helped me to start becoming a lot of aware of my own patterns and the way that I was showing up and how I was affecting it. It also made me become more aware of how I was showing up as a leader in business, which I didn't want to admit. I thought I could compartmentalize it too, and I wasn't doing as good of a job as I wanted, which actually led me to my next coach, where I really had to uncover and work through a lot of the traumas that were creating those patterns or had created those patterns. And it was one of the most challenging seasons of life, but also one of the greatest gifts because I had, again, that willingness to lean into it. And I knew that I would never be as effective trying to do it on my own as I would by hiring another expert. Because one, when people pay, as we know, they pay attention, right?
Yep.
So if you
Yep.
get something for free, you're just not going to value it as much. It's just a fact of life. And then secondarily, now you have the guidance. And that coach might be somebody that you outgrow, might be with somebody that you're with for the entirety of your life. I don't know. But the main moral of the story is it's okay to admit that you don't know everything. It's okay to ask for help, whether you're a male or a female. I think it's paramount in any part of our lives. And it's okay not to know what you're going to do next. Part of life, I mean, life is a journey. It's not a destination, it's an exploration. So why not have a little bit of fun in the process, surrender and let go of some of that pressure? Like, so if you had somebody that is struggling with some of those ideas, what would you say to the audience right now? That was my personal reflection on it, but what would you say to those listeners that are struggling with some of those basic paradigms at the moment?
Yeah, I would just encourage them to first start by trusting yourself enough to reflect on yourself. What is it that you really want? Because for me, that was step one. Once I made that decision, my mindset switch was pretty easy, and not everybody is bred that way. Not everybody's built that way. And so I acknowledge that. And I actually have that built into my coaching framework. The very first thing in my framework is reflection. So taking the time to consider things from all spaces and all angles, because you can be influenced by one thing or the other, right? And so you may be dead set, like, I'm getting a coach. That's it. I'm done. And then you ask somebody else, you mention like, hey, I'm thinking about getting a coach. And they're like, well, why would you do that? That's stupid. Okay, well, now I'm sitting here second guessing the fact that I should get a coach, right? Versus cut out the external because it doesn't matter. Their perspectives don't matter. This is your life, right? And like you said, it's a journey, but you shouldn't be journeying on someone else's path. So take a moment. You could even write down pros and cons if you want to, and just consider, what is it that I want, right? Like Dean talks about the 7 levels deep exercise, right? This is a great thing to do there. And for anybody listening, if you don't know what that is, you just ask yourself, what do I want? Answer it honestly, and then ask yourself why. Why do I want that? Answer it. Cool. Why do I want that? What's important about that? What would happen for it, right? Just keep asking and peeling back those layers until you get to what's at the core of that. And then I really believe that if you get down to the core of that then you're unstoppable. But you have to stop asking everybody else what they think you should do. Because if I sat here and I asked everybody else what I thought or what they thought I should be doing, I would still be in a restaurant working on the weekends, working 70 hours a week, being completely miserable doing what I'm doing because the restaurants have always been good to me. They've always been safe for me, which is what my mom told me, which that's a whole nother thing, right? Your parents tell you things to keep you safe. So as much as we want to ask our parents for help with everything, don't ask them either because they don't know any better either. That's why they are where they are. They love you and they want to protect you. But to answer your question, I hope I'm answering your question. I really like reflect, dig into it. You don't need to meditate, but like take some time to yourself. Even if you've got a family, like maybe take an afternoon, go sit in a coffee shop by yourself where you can really drop in somewhere that's beautiful to you, somewhere that you enjoy being, where you can just be at peace and sit with your own thoughts and your own opinions because you have your own jury inside of your head that can help you to answer those questions and you don't need everybody else.
Yeah. It's really easy to get stuck to distract yourself with the busyness of life. But, more often than not, a lot of those things can wait. And what's more important than exploring what really can provide the ultimate level of joy and fulfillment in your life?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple and straightforward. And, one thing too, it's so funny, 7 levels deep. Here's a pro tip to the listeners. You know that you've really come to the core of your why when you break into tears. And yes, men, it's okay for you to do that too. I remember that. I got to the first 5 layers and I'm like, I don't understand what the point of this is. This is so easy. Like, where am I going? And all of a sudden the next layer comes and it was like, boom, emotional flood. And there was still another couple to go deeper. But give yourself the permission to be emotionally vulnerable. I think it's also an exercise that is best done when facilitated by a friend or coach or mentor, somebody that you have the ability to get really vulnerable with. There's just a different level, at least for me, of introspection that comes through the conversational dynamic from it. And I'll tell you guys, I know what my word came down to: freedom. It was
Mm.
financial freedom. It was freedom in the ability to choose what I want to be able to do, when I want to do it. Freedom to decide that I can go spend the day with my kids if I want, volunteer in their class. Freedom to be able to take my family on a trip or vacation. We had a really blessed childhood, and I want to be able to give back to my parents and do some of those things. Freedom to be able to explore the world and tackle all those activities because I've taken great care of my health. It's another theme that I really want to point out here too. And you're another great example of this, V, is most really successful entrepreneurs, one commonality that I see more often than not always, is they're also very, very passionate about their personal health care. And what that looks like is different for everybody. I could talk for days about my personal healthcare strategies and what my day-to-day looks like. But the reality is you got to find out what looks best for you, what feels best for you, and go pursue that thing. And I know for you, one of those things was dance. But you talked earlier about, you hit rock bottom. Like, what was that tipping point? What did that look like? What did that feel like? Because I think that's important because, some of the listeners may be going, am I at rock bottom? Like, how do I know when I'm at that point where I'm really ready for change, especially if they're battling a lot of the other voices?
Yeah, that's a good question. So now it's my turn to get really vulnerable. And you probably don't know this about me either. So you're doing a great job asking questions that you don't actually know the answer to. So it's great. So I was working for a local restaurant chain at that time, and I had been transferred to a different location because I wanted to grow. I was trying to move from a restaurant manager to an assistant general manager. And so they transferred me because it was a bigger store. The AGM was leaving, and my GM had just been transferred there. And he was like, I love you. Come work with me. This is a shoe-in for you. Like, you already are an AGM basically. So let's move you. We'll get you trained up on the last few things and we'll go from there. And so I transfer and then I'm driving 1 hour to work one way. So my commute is insane because at the time I lived on the west side of the valley and I was driving to Gilbert, and the traffic is a nightmare because I was on the night shift. So it was awful, absolutely awful on the freeway. If anybody listening lives in Phoenix, you guys, know.
Yes.
So I was doing this for 3 years because a few months in, my GM ended up moving out of state. He got another job, another opportunity for another restaurant chain, and he was gone. And I just kept getting the runaround when I was there. And there was a point where I was bringing them my job description. Here's the restaurant manager job. Here's the AGM job. I've asked several people in leadership to highlight things that I'm proficient in. I'm proficient in both roles. So why don't I still have this? I had even revamped their alcohol program, and I changed it. And I don't know how much you know about food and beverage, but generally you have a fairly decent split between food and bev. And I'm trying not to give away the name of the restaurant, but they have a wine glass in their logo. And when I asked them, like, hey, why is it only 20% liquor sales and 80% food? And they're like, well, we don't do that here. We don't sell alcohol here. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There is a wine glass in the logo. So I revamped the entire liquor program. I would take our team out to local breweries and distilleries, and we would taste things and learn about things. And I was able to boost the P&L sales for liquor and beer by 10%. So it became a 70-30 split. And so I took that to my general manager or my district manager, and I said, okay, job description, increase in sales. Now what? And they're like, well, I don't know, a lot of the runaround, because that was when the pandemic was happening. We don't have the money, the pandemic. And then they asked me to go and train at another location. They wanted me to train the AGM they hired for that store, who was a man. And I was like, okay, I see how this is. Well, if you don't trust me enough to promote me and give me the title and the pay, but you trust me to go to another location and train somebody else to do the same job, then I'm thinking we're done here. Okay. Now, right. Simultaneously, I have a relationship at the time, this is where I'm going to get real vulnerable. And we'll go there. So I was with this person for probably like 8 months, and some of this is on me for sure. But he worked with me as well at the same restaurant. And it turns out he was actually in another relationship that I never knew about. And that was a 4-year relationship. So I was the other person in the relationship, and I didn't know about it at all. And then as soon as she found out about me, I started getting harassed at work. And as soon as I found out, I stepped out of it. Like, I was humiliated. I was embarrassed. It was terrible because everybody at work knew both of us. And so this is why I say I'm getting vulnerable. It's probably not something that normally comes up on your podcast, but it happens. It's a part of life, right?
Yeah,
like it's
exactly.
probably happened to, I know I'm not the only one. I know other people that's happened to. So I'm kind of dealing with both things at the same time. And then the pandemic happens. That was all at the beginning of February. The pandemic happens, and all of a sudden the world is shutting down. My little sister had just gotten married, so I watched her go, walk down the aisle, which was beautiful. And I was like, cool, I'll probably die alone. That was like how I was feeling at the time. My job is like, they don't respect me. Men don't respect me. My little sister's getting married. I always thought I'd get married before her. And so it was all of this compounding, right? And then boom, the pandemic hits. And then the next thing I know, I'm on my cell phone 24/7 on TikTok, because what else are you going to do? I think we were all just stuck on TikTok at the time. And I was drinking all day, because what else are you going to do? And I was in the dance community still at that time too. And so I always had that to look forward to. But my point is, I felt like I had nothing at the time. I was getting ready to leave my career. I didn't have a relationship. I was alone. And so I was forced to really come to terms with myself and the decisions that I was making. And I said, okay, you can blame this guy for treating you the way he treated you all day long, but why didn't you see that? Why did you ignore that? Why is that somebody you're keeping company with? Why are you working for a company for 3 years when they've probably given you several signs that they don't appreciate the hard work that you do? And so when I was forced to stare myself in the mirror with that, and I was like, wow, it's all my choice. I'm making the decisions to have shitty company. Sorry, hope I can say that on your podcast. And instead I'm overweight, I'm miserable. I don't like the people that I'm around. It's making me negative. And so it really was like, it really felt like a rock bottom moment for me. And so I had to kind of pick myself up during that time and just say, okay, so what are we going to do about this? I think at the time I was 26. So that's probably about the time most of us feel like we're at rock bottom and we've got to make a change. But I feel like mine was pretty intense. So that's pretty much what my rock bottom was and what my rock bottom felt like. And I would venture to guess a lot of women have had very similar experiences to that. So it was once I decided to get my shit together because nobody else was in charge of my life and who I spent time around except for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for your vulnerability. And I also think it's important to note that it happens to men just as much as women.
I'm sure.
It's just fun, if not more, honestly. I mean, like, I think it just, I don't know why the stigma ends up being stuck to men so often, but as being the perpetrators, but oftentimes
Yeah,
they are
that's fair.
just as likely to be the victim. And what I really appreciate about your story is I think everybody has gone through, and this is probably not going to be the only time that you go through this. Like not to the same degree of magnitude, but life has its seasons. We're going to have different challenges, different turning points in our life. And what I'm really curious about, and maybe you have a tip for our audience and listeners if they're going through something in any way similar, male or female, um, how you navigated that particular journey. And the one thing that really is standing out to me is the loneliness. Yes, the decisions that you're making with your health at the time were obviously contributing to the way that you were feeling internally, emotionally, externally, everything. Um, but when you talk about like, I lost my boyfriend, and I feel humiliated. I lost my career. My health is in the toilet, and you feel like you have nothing. Like that's scary. So and like knowing where you're at today, it's almost hard for me to imagine, but how do you navigate a time like that? Or maybe somebody's on the precipice of making those decisions where they recognize that the next step is going to be that loneliness. And that's what's preventing them from ending the relationship. That's the thing that's preventing them from leaving the career that's not fulfilling or creating a new turning point in their health. I think, it's one thing to be in the moment and you just got to deal with it. Hopefully you do. But it's another one to realize that the decisions you're about to make could lead you there. And you do feel alone. Like what would you say to those people?
Yeah. There are different periods of growth in our lives, which you just kind of mentioned. And I think I know we all spend a lot of time looking for our tribe. We spend a lot of time looking for our people. And
We were talking about this
we,
yesterday.
yeah,
Yeah.
we, you outgrow them. This is what
Mhm.
you and I were exactly talking about yesterday. And I will share openly right now. I am going through a season of loneliness right now where
Mhm.
I'm outgrowing the people that I'm around. And it feels similar in some ways, but the more work I do on myself and the more I lean into the things that light me up in life, the more okay I am with it. Feeling lonely is still feeling lonely regardless. But
Mhm.
when again, it's a mindset thing. You have to choose what you're focusing on, right?
Mhm.
So at the time, I was like, yeah, all this stuff sucks. My world is ending. Maybe my life is over. Who knows, right? Like whatever. I don't even remember exactly, but it was that rock bottom moment. I had the dance community
Mhm.
that was great. I had something that I could look forward to. And so what I knew was that I'm a fighter. I'm scrappy and I don't just lay down. So I've always had something about that. And I feel like most people do,
Is
you
it the
know,
red hair? Sorry, guys, inside joke. I had
it
to do
could
that.
be,
I
it
had
could
to go
be.
there right then. There's this whole thing. I won't tell the backstory. I don't want to derail you. Let me get you back to it
Moral story is that I'm not a redhead. I'm a blonde.
though. Strawberry blonde, strawberry blonde.
So, I feel like everybody has that little spark inside of them. right? It's that piece when we're super young that makes us feel invincible,
Mhm.
right? And I think that it's there for all of us if we allow that voice to be louder than the one that wants to shit on us all the time and tell us that we're nothing, right? And so I was making a choice to listen to that voice. And so I started listening to The Secret, which I know, people either you love it or you hate it. If you hate it, I challenge you to give it a chance.
That was my
Um,
inception point.
yeah.
Literally, yeah.
Well, actually, before that, a couple years before that, I had listened to Your Wish is Your Command, which was really like my first tipping point. That for me was my tipping point. So I already kind of knew I get to choose what I focus on. And that was where I learned it was from Kevin Trudeau. So I started listening to The Secret. I started leaning into Rachel Hollis and into Brendan Burchard. Those were my two coaching gateway people that I was listening to a lot, but like really the biggest thing, the most tangible thing, because that may not resonate with everybody listening, right?
Mhm.
Is to focus on the light that you see at the end of the tunnel, no matter how small it is. And then you just move towards that. Because the fact that I had the dance community, I had something that it was actually a very therapeutic outlet for me because I knew I could lean on that. And then I started to post my weight loss journey and people started to encourage me and ask me if I was a coach. And it just everything kind of spiraled from there. And now I look back and I'm like, yeah, I had a lot of misery in there. I had a tribe of animal volunteer people that I thought was my tribe. And at that time, I also felt very abandoned by them. And now I look back and I'm like, well, they just weren't for me. And I found more people since then who are for me, but then you outgrow those people. And then you find other people who have similar interests to you and then they're encouraging you and they're lifting you up. And so to answer your question, I would encourage anybody listening to lean on that little spark. It's just like taking that one, dipping your toe in the pool, like I mentioned earlier. It's just that one little tiny thing, and it's enough to show you, like, yeah, it's okay over here. We're still doing okay. We're still safe, and we can take that next step forward. And so if you're always curious and you're always exploring, then you'll always find another door that's open.
Mhm. That's very, very insightful. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to really speak to that because there's a couple more things that I heard. I mean, and you said this directly, but I want to call more attention to them again. One, I heard community. Like you found a community of people, and sometimes people might look at, oh, I'm just distracting myself. It's like, are you really distracting yourself? If you're doing something that is good for you, that's good for others, I mean, it serves the greater good, like, and it feels good to do. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, that's a great thing. A lot of people, um, I think that, frankly, the overwhelming majority of people, like I joked about it earlier, we get stuck, we get hyper focused on the problems. You ask them what they want, they go right to what they don't want. But that's the problem is you get in these states of pain and then they just put themselves in a room, they lock themselves all day and they just ruminate over it and they tell themselves the same story and over and over and over. And the only way to create something new is to one, focus on that little light at the end of the tunnel, but two, interrupt that pattern. Now is the time to not sit back and wallow. It's the time to go out and explore. If you're a reader, pick up new books. If you're a hiker, go hike new places. Like if there's something that you've been wanting to pursue that you've never pursued, go try it. Go jump out of the airplane. Go take the dance class. Or you said, maybe it's just jumping off the little 3 foot ledge. Like, go hop into the cold plunge, start the new fitness class, go to a networking group, do one of the dating things where it's, what do they call those? Like I was thinking like the hot seats where it's like you rotate tables. You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about
speed
anyway.
dating.
Speed dating. Yeah. Like go
Yeah.
do something like that. It doesn't, the main point is instead of going in, like spend the time going internal to really think about what you want to create and also allow yourself to feel and process the emotions. I think this is also something that's not spoken to anywhere near enough is people avoid emotion. Emotions are there as a guide. They're there as a signal. They're designed to tell us that something is or is not working. And we have to process them. The more that we try to bury them, the more that they come up. And they'll show up in other areas of our life. You start to feed the monster inadvertently. it's okay to feel the emotion. And the irony that happens is when you allow yourself to feel the emotion, in most cases, you now creating an environment where you're able to disempower it, where you're allowing it to flow through you. So recognize the emotion. I think accept that we're at a stage of life that you don't like, but it's just that it's a stage. Doesn't nothing lasts forever. Focus on the little things you want, that light at the end of the tunnel, whether it's big and bright or very, very, very minute and dim at the moment. Try new things, get out, explore. I am a firm believer that everything happens by design, whether it's you call it God, the universe, whatever the thing is, spirit, like it all happens by design, but it's our jobs to interpret and find the meaning in those moments. I think that's a really interesting thing. So, thank you so much. I mean, this has been a really fun episode. And, thank you to our audience for spending your time with us on the Perpetual Growth Podcast. Big shout out to Vanessa Kavulish for spending so much time with us today. I really loved our conversation. I call you V. Vanessa, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about what you're working on? Or if they know what somebody wants to reach out and talk about doing some coaching or dance class, where can they find you?
Yeah, I live my life on Instagram, so that is the easiest place. For coaching, it's coach.ness. And my bar is Benefit Bar AZ. So those are the two easiest places to find me. You can also find me for business consulting on the coaching page for small mobile businesses. I do both of those things now. And I also would like to offer to your listeners, Zac, if anybody messages me on any of those platforms and want any of those services and they mention the word growth, I will give them 20% off.
Oh, sweet. That's amazing. What a gift. Thank you, V. I appreciate that. And to the listeners too, we'll make sure that we have this episode and all the links and everything in the show notes when it comes out. Now, if this episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Make sure to share it, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review so we can help reach even more people on their growth journey. And remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. We'll see you next time.